Thank you, everyone. I really do appreciate being selected to be a speaker here for this event. My name is Elle Wyant, and I use the pronouns she and her. And I'd like you to remember these two words, or not two words, two numbers, the number 34 and the number 11. As mentioned in the introduction, my job is as an account executive with UPS. Interestingly enough, our newest chief executive officer at UPS is Carol Tomei. And Carol Tomei is a fearless leader in her own right, who is considered one of the most powerful women leaders in business, according to Forbes magazine, recently released. So I would love to have her do a article for Fearless at some point. Now, with that being said, I want you to know the importance of 34. I am transgender, as mentioned in the introduction, and that means that the state of one's gender identity or gender expression does not match one's assigned sex at birth. So transgender is independent of sexual orientation. Transgender people may identify as heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, or many other terms out there. There are many. So for the record, also I want to say that I am single. I am a single lesbian. I feel like I have to wear a badge everywhere I go. I don't have one. I need one. We've got 500 some people here in this audience. I'm single. So more we'll focus back here. On October 20th, a young man knocked on my door, and I live in Marengo, Iowa. And he asked me if he could have a place to stay. Never in a million years has anything like this happened before. I exchanged my driver's license. He exchanged his driver's license. I got his license plate. And I asked him, why did you come to my house? And he said, I felt comfortable after seeing your Biden for president sign out by the street, which that's a whole different story. So shortly afterwards, my parents drove up, and which is a long country lane. And they asked who the car belonged to, and then proceeded in telling me that I was crazy. People get killed for things like this. And after all, I am in a very fragile community, and they're not referencing Marengo in any way. And I shrugged it off as them being paranoid. But looking back, had my daughters been home that night, I probably would not have let a stranger into my house. And in the end, it was completely fine. I learned something great about a younger gentleman and his travels around the world, and that was that. So the number 34, year to date, there have been 34 transgender community members in the United States murdered. 34. Angel Hayes was the last reported victim of a violent hate crime, and she was murdered in Memphis, Tennessee on October 25th. So that was 18 days ago. If you think about it, the chances of a young gentleman coming to my house on October 20th, I could have easily been that number 34, because I didn't know who that person was. They might have known me and not liked who I was, right? So while I don't know the full story of this victim, like all of us, these people were human beings. They were love partners, parents, family members, friends of the community. They worked, went to school, attended houses of worship. They were real people who did not deserve to have their lives taken from them. So this is the highest number of murders since tracking began in 2018 by the Human Rights Campaign. And as I mentioned before, I probably could have been number 34, but powers that be have a greater purpose for me. At the age of 13, I presented outwardly as a male, and I had been struggling with gender dysphoria my whole life. 11 years ago, I recently decided to, well, I didn't recently decide. 11 years ago, I got divorced. And I got divorced from my ex-wife, and I have 2 children. Their ages at the time were 2 and 1, Reagan and Lillian. And from that day forward, from the day I signed my divorce papers, I started my life living authentically. and in some ways, fearlessly. I was unsure about how my family, the community, and my employer would react. I moved my daughters to a small farmhouse in Marengo, Iowa, and began my transition essentially in the same community where I was born and lived until I was 18. So a lot of people knew who I was at a very young age, but did not know who I was at an older age. I was scared of the repercussions, and I had very limited support group at the time. So when it came out, it was kind of secretively, and then all of a sudden it was wham in your face in public. Thankfully, UPS has a workplace non-discrimination policy and in place, so I felt comfortable coming out at work. But I did have my share of negative experiences. My parents own a winery called Fireside Winery, and we surprisingly received letters of hate that we employed people in the LGBT community. I'm in a very red county in a red precinct, but still to receive letters of hate for having LGBT people, specifically me, working at the winery on the weekends was shocking. I also had letters or a letter posted in the women's restroom at UPS stating women only. There weren't a lot of women at that UPS center, and we had already had a non-discrimination explanation. So it was very pointed towards me, which was hurtful. But once again, I would never use a man's restroom as a woman. We need more, we need more unisex restrooms, point blank. So, those are a few experiences. As a woman, and as many of you here to this group, I know you've all experienced mansplaining and have probably had an experience of male privilege. I know, coming from a perspective of being assigned male at birth, that male privilege is real, and it is something that we have to deal with. So I would never have asked for this to go through this. I would never wish anyone to be transgender if they had a choice, and it's really not a choice. But I know that people will be confused and even have a sense of feeling threatened. I learned early on that I had to educate and help others reduce their level of fear of ignorance. And ultimately, I want my daughters, families, friends, and community members to know that they too are not alone, and that I was going to be strong for them, and knowing that I too would be fearless for those others that could not. So I was not going to be, I'm not going to be able to hide it, and I was going to have to own it. And in fact, I was going to have to own my height. It's not easy being 5'11" and wearing heels to work, but I had to own that as well. And I kind of consider it my own versions of a male's power type. So a lot has changed in 11 years, and in many, many ways for the better. And I'm encouraged by President-elect Joe Biden and the chance to pass the Equality Act. I now get great enjoyment watching my daughters. Reagan is 13, and today Lillian is 11 on Veterans Day. So I enjoy seeing them interact with their classmates and talking passionately about the LGBT community and topics and their friends that are in that community, and being strong leaders. And in a previous breakout session, we talked about having a lot more youth interaction with our women and growing them up to be strong leaders. So it's scary starting something new and facing your fears, but we have to get comfortable with facing our fears and owning it fearlessly.